My name is Ava Hart. I am 34 years old, and I live in the suburbs of Chicago. I sat at the defense table, my hands folded tightly on the cold, polished wood. The courtroom smelled like floor wax and old paper. My name is Ava Hart. I am 34 years old. To the lawyers in this room, I am just a defendant being sued for $5.5 million. Across the aisle, a man and a woman were whispering and giggling. Kevin and Karen. My biological parents. They looked so confident in their stiff, new suits. They thought this was just a payday. They had abandoned me at O'Hare Airport when I was 5 years old. They left me with nothing but a small backpack and a terrified heart. They didn't want me then. But now that my adoptive father, the man who actually saved me, had died and left me his fortune, they suddenly wanted to be parents again. They didn't look at me with love. They looked at me like a bank vault they were about to crack open. They were laughing because they thought I was weak. They thought I was just a scared orphan. They kept checking their watches, looking at the empty high bench at the front of the room. They had no idea who I had become in the last 29 years. They didn't know the judge they were waiting for was me. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Ava Hart. I am 34 years old. The memory does not fade. People say time heals all wounds, but that is a lie. Time just puts a layer of dust over them. If you blow the dust away, the wound is still there, red and bleeding. My wound starts in 1994. I was 5 years old. I remember the car ride. It was a gray sedan. The seats were sticky and smelled like old cigarettes and pine air freshener. I sat in the back. I didn't have a booster seat. I just sat on the gray fabric, my legs sticking straight out because they were too short to bend over the edge. My mother, Karen, was driving. My father, Kevin, was in the passenger seat. They were arguing. They always argued. It was a low, buzzing sound like angry bees. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. It was the tone of people who were trapped. I was wearing my favorite outfit. It was a denim jumper with a sunflower embroidered on the chest. Underneath, I wore a white t-shirt. I had red sneakers on my feet. I loved those sneakers. They made me feel fast. I had a small backpack on my lap. It was pink. Inside, I had one change of underwear, a juice box that was warm, and a small stuffed bear with one ear missing. "Are we going on a trip?" I asked. My voice was small. I learned early that being loud was a mistake. "Shut up, Ava," Kevin said. He didn't turn around. He just stared out the window. Karen looked at me in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were hard. They were like stones. "Yes," she said, "a big trip, just us." But she was lying. I knew she was lying because there were no suitcases. The trunk was empty. We were going to the airport, but we had no luggage. Even at 5, I knew you needed bags to go on an airplane. We arrived at O'Hare International Airport. It was a monster of a place. It was loud and confusing. Cars were honking. Police whistles were blowing. The air smelled like jet fuel and exhaust. It made my stomach hurt. Kevin got out and opened my door. He didn't offer me a hand. I jumped down onto the pavement. The concrete was hard under my red sneakers. "Come on," he said. He walked fast. I had to run to keep up. My little legs pumped up and down. I clutched my pink backpack straps tight. I was afraid of getting lost. The airport was so big. The ceiling was so high. It felt like the sky was made of metal beams and fluorescent lights. We walked past the check-in counters. We walked past the people hugging and crying. We walked past the gift shops with the spinning racks of magazines. We went down an escalator. I was scared of escalators. I thought they would eat my shoelaces. I reached for Karen's hand, but she pulled it away. She pretended to fix her purse strap. We went to the lower level. It was the baggage claim area. The air was colder down there. The carousels were spinning, spitting out black and blue suitcases. People were fighting for position, grabbing handles, dragging bags away. Kevin didn't stop at the regular carousels. He kept walking. He walked to the far end of the terminal. It was quieter there. The lights seemed dimmer. There was a sign that said oversized baggage. This was where the weird things came out. Golf clubs, skis, dog crates. Big boxes taped shut. There was a metal bench bolted to the floor. It was perforated steel, cold and uncomfortable. "Sit here," Kevin said. I sat. The metal was freezing through my denim jumper. My feet dangled above the speckled floor tiles. Karen wouldn't look at me. She was looking at the sliding doors where the taxis were lining up outside. She looked nervous. She kept tapping her foot. Kevin crouched down. He was eye level with me. He smelled like spearmint gum and sweat. "Ava, we have to go talk to a man about tickets," he said. You stay right here, do not move. Can I come? I asked. No, he snapped. Then he softened his voice, but it sounded fake. It sounded like the voice used on TV commercials. We need you to play a game, it's a counting game. I liked games. Okay. I want you to count the bags, he said. He pointed to the oversized baggage door. Count them as they come out. When you get to 500, we will be back with ice cream. Ice cream? My eyes widened. Yes, chocolate, but you have to count. Don't look for us, look at the bags. If you look for us, you lose the game and no ice cream. Understand? I understand, I said. Start counting, he said. 1, I whispered as a set of golf clubs slid onto the belt. Kevin stood up. He looked at Karen. He nodded once. They turned around and walked away. They walked fast. They didn't look back, not once. I watched their backs. I watched Kevin's brown leather jacket. I watched Karen's blonde hair bouncing on her shoulders. I wanted to call out to them. I wanted to say, wait, I'm scared, but I wanted the ice cream, and I wanted to be a good girl, so I turned my head back to the conveyor belt. 2, I said. A large cardboard box came out. 3, a stroller. I sat there on that metal bench. I was a statue of obedience. I counted, I concentrated, I took my job seriously. 4, 5, 6, the numbers went up. The time went by. At first it was okay. There were people around. A man picked up the golf clubs. A woman took the stroller. They glanced at me, but they didn't stop. They probably thought my parents were just in the bathroom. 22, 23. My legs started to fall asleep. The cold from the bench was seeping into my bones. 51, 52. It started to get quiet. The rush of passengers from a flight died down. The carousel stopped moving. It just hummed and went still. I waited. I swung my legs. I checked my numbers. Maybe I missed one. The belt started again 10 minutes later. A new flight had landed. 53, I said. I was thirsty. I remembered my warm juice box in my backpack. I wanted to drink it, but I was afraid that if I looked down to unzip my bag, I would miss a piece of luggage. I couldn't lose the game. Kevin said 500. An hour passed. Then 2. I had to use the bathroom. I squeezed my legs together. I rocked back and forth. Hold it, Ava, hold it. 110, I whispered. My voice was raspy. The airport changed. The light coming through the sliding doors turned from gray to dark blue, then to black. Night was falling. My stomach grumbled. It hurt. People walked by. They looked at me differently now. Earlier, they looked with disinterest. Now they looked with concern. They saw a little girl in a sunflower dress, alone, sitting on a metal bench for hours. A security guard walked past on a Segway. He slowed down. He looked at me. I looked at the belt. 140, I said loudly, so he would know I was busy. He moved on. I started to cry around number 200. I didn't sob, I just let the tears fall. They were hot on my cold cheeks. I knew deep down in my stomach that something was wrong. 500 was a big number. It was taking too long. Where was the ice cream? Where were they? I imagined them laughing. I imagined them eating dinner without me. The cold was unbearable now. I wrapped my arms around myself. I pulled my knees up to my chest, putting my red sneakers on the bench. 290, I whispered into my knees. I fell asleep sitting up. I couldn't help it. I was 5. I was exhausted from fear. I woke up because someone was touching my shoulder. I jumped. I gasped. 300, I yelled, trying to get back in the game. It wasn't Kevin. It wasn't Karen. It was a man. He was old. He had white hair and a kind face. He was wearing a gray suit, but it looked rumpled, like he had been traveling for a long time. He had a briefcase in one hand and a cane in the other. He was kneeling in front of me just like Kevin had, but his eyes were different. Kevin's eyes were like ice. This man's eyes were like warm tea. "Hello there," he said. His voice was deep and scratchy. I stared at him. I wiped the sleep crust from my eyes. "I have to count," I said. "I'm not at 500 yet." The man frowned. The lines on his forehead deepened. "Who told you to count, little one?" "My daddy and my mommy. They went to get tickets. And ice cream." The man looked around the empty baggage claim area. It was almost midnight. The carousel was turned off. The airport was quiet, except for the cleaners buffing the floors. "How long have you been sitting here?" he asked. Since the sun was up," I said. The man's face crumbled. It looked like he was in pain. He put his hand on my small knee. His hand was warm. "My name is William," he said. "I don't think they're coming back with the ice cream, sweetheart." "They have to," I said. I started to panic. My chest felt tight. "They promised. I just need to get to 500. William shook his head slowly. "No. You don't need to count anymore. The game is over." He stood up. He looked angry, but not at me. He looked angry at the world. He took off his suit jacket. It was heavy wool. He wrapped it around my shoulders. It smelled like pipe tobacco and old paper. It was the best smell I had ever smelled. It smelled like safety. "Come with me," he said. He held out his hand. I looked at the baggage belt. I looked at the door. I looked at his hand. I knew. In that moment, I knew. Kevin and Karen were gone. I was just a piece of luggage they didn't want to claim. I was oversized. I was too heavy, so they left me. I took William's hand. He didn't take me to security immediately. He took me to a vending machine. He bought me a bottle of water and a bag of chocolate chip cookies. He sat with me while I ate them like a starving animal. Then, he called the police. I remember the flashing lights. I remember the female officer who smelled like peppermint. I remember being carried. But mostly, I remember William. He didn't leave. He stayed while the police asked me questions I didn't know how to answer. "What's your last name?" "Hart, Ava Hart." "Where do your parents live?" "In the house with the blue door." They couldn't find them. Kevin and Karen had vanished. The address I gave led to an empty rental house. They had cleared out. They had planned this. They didn't just leave me at the airport, they left their whole lives to get away from me. I went into the system. Foster care. It was a scary place. Loud houses. Mean older kids. Social workers who looked tired all the time. But William kept coming back. He wasn't a relative. He was just a stranger who found a girl on a bench, but he visited. He brought me books. He brought me a new bear to replace the one with the missing ear. It took 2 years. The courts were slow, but William fought for me. He was rich, I learned later. He was a retired lawyer. He knew how to fight. On my 7th birthday, he signed the papers. I wasn't Ava Hart, the abandoned girl, anymore. I was Ava Hart, daughter of William. He saved me. He didn't just give me a home. He gave me a voice. He taught me that I wasn't garbage. He taught me to read, to think, to argue. He taught me the law. But deep down, the 5-year-old girl was still there. She was still sitting on that metal bench, counting to 500, waiting for people who would never come. I grew up with a hole in my chest. I filled it with grades. I filled it with achievements. I filled it with the law. I became a judge because I wanted to control the rules. I wanted to make sure that people who did bad things got punished. I wanted to make sure no one was ever left waiting on a bench again. Life with William was quiet. It was peaceful. We lived in a large brick house in the suburbs of Chicago. It was a house full of books. There were books in the kitchen, books in the hallway, books stacked on the stairs. William was my father, my mother, and my best friend. He never married. I was his only family. We were a team of 2. He never lied to me about Kevin and Karen. He told me the truth. "They were broken people, Ava," he would say when I cried at night. "Some people are not built to care for others. They lack the mechanism, like a clock missing a gear." "Did I do something wrong?" I would ask. "Did I count wrong?" "No," he would say firmly, holding my face in his hands. "You did nothing wrong, you are perfect, their brokenness is not your fault." I tried to believe him. Most days I did. I went to law school. I graduated at the top of my class. I worked in the district attorney's office. I was ruthless. I put criminals away without blinking. I had no sympathy for people who hurt the weak. Then, when I was 34, William got sick. It was pancreatic cancer. It was fast and brutal. It took him in 3 months. I watched the strongest man I knew wither away. I sat by his bedside in our library, reading to him as he slept. I held his hand, the same hand that had pulled me off that airport bench. When he took his last breath, the world went silent again. The silence was deafening. I was alone, truly alone. The funeral was small. William didn't like crowds. Just me, some of his old law partners, and a few neighbors. I stood by his grave in the rain, wearing black, feeling like that 5-year-old girl again. The cold was back. The wind cut through my coat just like the air conditioning at O'Hare. I went home to the big brick house. It felt empty. I walked through the rooms, touching his books, smelling his pipe tobacco. I missed him so much my bones ached. 2 weeks later, the lawyer called. It was time to read the will. I went to the firm downtown. I sat in a leather chair. The executor, a man named Mr. Henderson, looked at me over his glasses. "William was a very successful man, Ava," he said. "He invested wisely, he lived simply." He slid a document across the table. "He left everything to you, the house, the investments, the savings." I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. $5.5 million. I stared at it. It was just a number. It couldn't buy William back. It couldn't buy me a father, but it was security. It meant I would never have to worry. I could do good with this. I could help kids like me. I signed the papers. I went home. The will became public record. That's how it works. When a wealthy man dies, people notice. The newspapers ran a small obituary. Retired attorney William Vance leaves estate to adopted daughter, Ava Hart. It was printed on a Tuesday. On Thursday, the knock came at my door. I was drinking tea, staring out the window at the rain. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door. A man stood there. He was wearing a cheap windbreaker and holding a manila envelope. Ava Hart, he asked. Yes, you've been served. He thrust the envelope into my hand and walked away. I stood there, confused. I closed the door. I walked into the kitchen and opened the envelope. It was a lawsuit. Plaintiffs, Kevin Miller and Karen Miller. Defendant, Ava Hart née Miller. My hands started to shake. The tea in my cup rippled. Kevin and Karen Miller, that was their name. I hadn't heard it in 29 years. I read the document. The words swam before my eyes. Civil suit for damages, emotional distress, loss of consortium, wrongful kidnapping. I dropped the cup. It shattered on the floor. Tea splashed onto my socks. I didn't move. I sat down at the kitchen table and forced myself to read. The lawsuit claimed that in 1994, I was kidnapped. They claimed that William Vance, a predator, had stolen me from the airport while they were in the bathroom. They claimed they had searched for me for decades. They claimed they had suffered extreme mental anguish. And now that my captor was dead, they had found me. They were suing for the entire estate, all $5.5 million. They said it was restitution for the years of love they had lost. I laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. It wasn't funny. It was horrific. They hadn't looked for me. They had abandoned me. But the timing was too perfect. They didn't come back when I graduated high school. They didn't come back when I passed the bar exam. They didn't come back when I became a judge. They came back 48 hours after the money was announced. They didn't want their daughter. They wanted the check. My shock turned into ice. The shaking stopped. I wasn't 5 years old anymore. I wasn't the girl on the bench counting luggage. I was a judge. I knew the law. I knew how to read evidence. I looked at the lawsuit again. It was poorly written. It was full of lies, but it was dangerous. If they could convince a jury that William had kidnapped me, they could invalidate the adoption. They could take everything. They could destroy William's name. That was the part that made me stand up. They could take the money. I didn't care about the money. But they were trying to paint William, my savior, my real father, as a monster. They were trying to say he stole me. That was unforgivable. I walked to the sink and washed my hands. I looked at myself in the reflection of the window. I saw my mother's eyes. I saw my father's chin. But the expression was all mine. You made a mistake, I whispered to the empty room. You should have left me alone. I went to my office. I pulled out a fresh legal pad. I took out my favorite pen. I wrote 2 names at the top, Kevin, Karen. I drew a line down the middle of the page, assets versus liabilities. To them, I was just a ledger entry. When I was 5, I was a liability. I cost money to feed and clothe, so they wrote me off. Now I was an asset. I came with $5.5 million attached. They thought this was going to be easy. They thought I would be emotional. They thought I would be so desperate for mommy and daddy that I would settle. They probably thought I would write them a check just to make them go away, or maybe I would fall into their arms crying, grateful they had found me. They didn't know who I was. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the law, and they had just walked into my courtroom. I spent the next 3 nights awake. I didn't sleep. I drank black coffee and studied the lawsuit. I treated it like a criminal file. I detached myself from the names. I stopped being Ava and started being the defendant. It is a survival mechanism. If you let the emotions in, you drown. If you look at the facts, you can swim. I laid the pages out on my dining room table. The narrative they had constructed was impressive in its audacity. They claimed that on November 14, 1994, they were a happy young couple taking their daughter on a vacation to Disney World. Lie, we had no luggage. They claimed they went to the restroom together, leaving me on a bench for 2 minutes. Lie, I counted to 300. I was there for 6 hours. They claimed when they came out, I was gone. They claimed they ran through the airport screaming my name. They claimed security ignored them. Lie, William found me alone in a deserted terminal at midnight. I looked at their signatures at the bottom of the complaint. Kevin Miller, Karen Miller. The handwriting was jagged, aggressive. I started to profile them. In my line of work, you learn to spot narcissists. A narcissist does not see people as humans, they see them as objects. To a narcissist, a child is an extension of themselves. If the child is good, it reflects well on them. If the child is difficult or expensive or annoying, the child is a defect. When I was 5, I was a defect. Maybe I cried too much. Maybe I ate too much. Maybe they just wanted to be free to gamble or travel or do whatever selfish people do. So, they disposed of the defect. They left it at the airport like a broken umbrella. But now the defect had increased in value. It was pure accounting. I sat back in my chair and rubbed my eyes. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Imagine abandoning your child. Imagine driving away while she sits on a cold bench. Imagine living your life for 29 years, never calling, never writing, never checking if she is alive. And then, imagine seeing her name in a newspaper next to a dollar sign. And your first thought isn't, oh my God, she's alive. Your first thought is, how can I get that money? It made me sick, physically sick. I had to run to the bathroom and dry heave. When I came back to the table, I was angry. Not the hot, screaming anger of a child. The cold, focused anger of a predator. They wanted to play games. Okay, I looked at the dates. Why did they wait 48 hours? Why not 24? Because they needed a lawyer. They had to find someone sleazy enough to take the case. I looked up their lawyer. Saul Goodman types exist in real life. His name was Barry Ritz. His website was flashy. We get you paid. He was an ambulance chaser. He probably took the case on contingency. He would get 30% if they won. He didn't care about the truth either. He just saw the $5.5 million. I needed help. I couldn't represent myself. A lawyer who represents herself has a fool for a client. I was too close to this. I needed someone cold. Someone who liked digging in the dirt. I picked up my phone. It was 3 a.m. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Marcus, voice on the other end was groggy. Ava, it's 3 in the morning. Is someone dead? No, I said, but some people are about to wish they were. Marcus was a forensic accountant. He used to work for the FBI. He could find a penny hidden in a haystack of tax returns. He was grumpy, antisocial, and brilliant. I need you to find everything, I said. I need tax returns from 1994 to present. I need credit card statements. I need gambling records. I need to know where they lived, what cars they drove, and how much money they lost. Who are we targeting? Marcus asked, hearing the edge in my voice. My parents, I said. There was a silence on the line. Marcus knew my story. He knew about the airport. I'm on my way, he said. Marcus arrived at 4:30 a.m. with a laptop and a box of donuts. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He just set up on the dining room table. Give me names and social security numbers if you have them, he said. I had them from the lawsuit. Kevin James Miller, Karen Sue Miller. Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard. He had access to databases that normal people didn't know existed. LexisNexis, TLO, old credit headers. Okay, let's go back to 1994, he muttered. We worked in silence as the sun came up. Here they are, Marcus said around 7 a.m. 1994 tax return, joint filing. He turned the screen to me. Income $22,000. Occupation, Kevin bartender. Karen unemployed. Dependents, Ava Miller. They claimed you, Marcus said. Of course they did, I said, for the tax deduction. Wait, Marcus said. He squinted at the screen. Look at 1995. He pulled up the next year. Income. $470,000, I gasped. What? How did they make $500,000? They were a bartender and unemployed. Marcus scrolled down. It's not listed as wages. It's listed as other income/settlement. Settlement, I asked. From what? It doesn't say, but that's a huge jump, Ava. That's life-changing money in 1995. Where did it go? I asked. Marcus clicked through to 1996. Income, $18,000. Gone, Marcus said. They burned through $470,000 in 1 year. How do you spend that much that fast? Gambling, I said. I remembered the conversation in the car. The mention of tickets. Not plane tickets. Lottery tickets, betting slips. Let's check the courts, Marcus said. If it was a settlement, there might be a lawsuit filing. He switched databases. He started searching civil records in Cook County from 1994 and 1995. Nothing in Cook County, he said. Let's try federal. He searched Pacer. Bingo, he whispered. He clicked a file. Kevin and Karen Miller v. Oceanic Airlines. Filed, January 1995. Cause of action, wrongful death/negligence. My heart stopped. Wrongful death, I whispered. Marcus opened the PDF. It was a scanned image of an old typewriter document. I read the summary. Plaintiffs allege that on November 14, 1994, due to the gross negligence of Oceanic Airlines security, their daughter, Ava Miller, was abducted from the terminal and is presumed deceased. The airline failed to secure the exits. The airline failed to monitor the baggage claim. They sued the airline. They abandoned me. They left me there on purpose. And then they turned around and sued the airline for losing me. They settled, Marcus said, reading the final judgment. The airline paid them $450,000 to shut up and go away. It was a nuisance settlement, cheaper than a trial. They sold me, I said. My voice was shaking. They didn't just leave me, they sold me for $450,000. But wait, Marcus said. To get a wrongful death settlement, you usually need a death certificate. Or at least an affidavit. He scrolled to the exhibits attached to the file. Exhibit A, Affidavit of Kevin Miller. I, Kevin Miller, swear under penalty of perjury that my daughter, Ava Miller, has not been seen or heard from since the incident. We have exhausted all search efforts. We believe her to be deceased. Dated, December 20, 1994. That was 1 month after they left me. 1 month, they didn't search, they didn't look. They waited 30 days, declared me dead, and cashed the check. I stared at the screen. I stared at my father's signature. This was it. This was the smoking gun. If they declared me dead in 1995 to get money, they couldn't sue me now claiming they were searching for me. They had trapped themselves. Print it, I said. Print everything. Marcus looked at me. He looked a little scared. I think I looked scary. I felt cold like the metal bench, but I also felt strong. What are you going to do? He asked. I'm going to court, I said, and I'm going to introduce them to the daughter they killed. I stood up. I felt a strange sense of calm. The mystery was gone. The question of why didn't they love me was answered. It wasn't about love. It was never about love. It was about business. And in business, you have to read the fine print. They had made a fatal error. They forgot that the little girl they left behind had grown up to be a judge. And judges don't like perjury. Get your suit, Marcus, I said. We have a deposition to prepare for. We're not going to settle, he asked. No, I said. We're going to trial. I walked to the window and looked out at the rain. I touched the glass. Count to 500, Kevin had said. Well, Kevin, I'm done counting. Now you're going to pay. The paper felt heavy in my hand. It was just a standard piece of legal stationery, yellowed with age, scanned into a digital file, and then printed out on my crisp white paper. But it weighed a ton. It weighed exactly as much as a 5-year-old girl. It was the affidavit. I sat in my office with the door locked. The rain was still hammering against the window, washing the world clean, but I felt dirty. I felt covered in a grime that wouldn't wash off. I read the words again. I, Kevin Miller, being of sound mind, that was a joke. A man of sound mind doesn't leave his child on a metal bench to freeze. A man of sound mind doesn't trade his flesh and blood for a settlement check. I looked at the date next to the signature. December 20, 1994. It was 5 weeks after they left me. 5 weeks. That was the mourning period. That was how long it took them to decide I was better off dead to them. They hadn't spent those 5 weeks passing out flyers. They hadn't spent them calling hospitals. They had spent them negotiating with an airline's legal team. They sold me, I said aloud. The room absorbed my voice. They sold me for $450,000. I did the math. I couldn't help it. I was a creature of logic now. If I weighed 40 pounds back then, they sold me for about $11,000 a pound. That was the market rate for their daughter. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. I didn't hire a family lawyer. I didn't hire a probate lawyer. I hired a shark. His name was Elias Thorne. He was the kind of lawyer other lawyers hated. He was mean, he was expensive, and he didn't care about feelings. He cared about winning. Elias, I said when he answered, I have something. Is it good? He asked. It's a kill shot. I met him at his office an hour later. I laid the documents out on his mahogany desk. The 1995 lawsuit. The settlement agreement. The affidavit declaring me dead. Elias read them in silence. He was a man who rarely showed emotion. He had seen it all. Murders, corporate fraud, embezzlement. But as he read Kevin's sworn statement, his eyebrows went up. Just a fraction. This is evil, he said softly. I know, I said. They signed a sworn statement saying you were deceased, Elias said, tapping the paper. They took the money based on that fact. If you were alive, the settlement would have been for kidnapping or negligence, not wrongful death. The payout for death is higher. They killed me on paper to maximize the profit, I said. Elias looked at me. For the first time I saw pity in his eyes. I hated it. Don't, I said. Don't feel sorry for me, just tell me if this wins the case. Elias leaned back. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. Ava, this doesn't just win the case. This sends them to prison. This is perjury. This is insurance fraud. And since they filed a new lawsuit this week claiming they've been looking for you, it proves the current lawsuit is fraudulent too. They are walking into a trap. Good, I said. I want to spring it. We have to be careful, Elias warned. We can't show this to them yet. If we show them this now, they will drop the lawsuit and run. They'll disappear again. No, I said firmly. I don't want them to run. I want them in court. I want them on the stand. I want them to swear under oath that they looked for me. You want to perjury trap them, Elias said. I want justice, I corrected him. They used the court system to sell me in 1995. I'm going to use the court system to destroy them in 2024. We spent the next week preparing. It was grueling. I had to relive every detail of that night at the airport. Elias made me tell the story over and over again. What did the bench feel like? Cold, metal, holes in the seat. What did you eat? Nothing. I had a warm juice box. How many bags did you count? 300. Every time I told the story, I took a piece of that 5-year-old girl and hardened her. I turned her tears into concrete. I needed to be a wall in that courtroom. I hired a private investigator to find out what they did with the money. The $450,000. It was gone, of course. The pie, a woman named Sarah, brought me the file. Casinos, she said. Riverboat casinos in Mississippi. They moved down there in early 1996. They lived like kings for about 8 months. Suites, champagne, blackjack tables. I looked at the photos she found. Grainy pictures from a casino newsletter. Big winners, the headline said. There they were, Kevin and Karen, holding big novelty checks. They were smiling, they were tan. Karen was wearing a sequined dress. Kevin had a gold watch. They were partying. While I was in a foster home, crying myself to sleep because I didn't have a toothbrush, they were drinking champagne bought with my death money. I looked at the date on the newsletter photo. February 14, 1996. Valentine's Day. I remembered that Valentine's Day. I was 7. I was in my second foster home. My foster mother had forgotten to get me a card. I made one for myself out of construction paper. I put the photo in the file. Thank you, Sarah, I said. There's one more thing, Sarah said. She hesitated. She looked nervous. What? They didn't just spend the money, she said. They had another child. The room stopped spinning. It just stopped. What? A daughter, Sarah said. Born in 1997. Her name is Megan. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. A sister. I had a sister. Where is she? I asked. She lives in a trailer park about an hour from here, Sarah said. She's 26. She works at a diner. She doesn't talk to them much. Does she know about me? I don't think so, Sarah said. Records show she was raised as an only child. I closed my eyes. They replaced me. They got the money, spent it, and when the money ran out, they got a new kid. A replacement model. Get me her address, I said. Ava, the trial starts in 2 days, Elias said. Do you really want to open this door? It's already open, I said. I need to know. I drove to the diner that night. I sat in my car and watched. I saw a girl wiping tables. She had blonde hair like Karen. She had the same chin as Kevin, but she looked tired. She looked broken. I didn't go in, not yet. I just watched her. She was the life I would have had if they hadn't left me. And looking at her worn-out shoes and the sadness in her shoulders, I realized something terrible. Leaving me at the airport was the best thing they ever did for me. It gave me William. It gave me a life. Megan got them. She was the one who suffered. She was the real victim. I started the car and drove away. I had a plan. The courtroom was packed. My father's death and the subsequent lawsuit was local news. People love a scandal involving money. They love to see a rich family tear itself apart. I sat at the defense table next to Elias. I wore a navy blue suit. My hair was pulled back in a tight bun. I wore no makeup. I wanted them to see my face. I wanted them to see the lines around my eyes. I wanted them to see the woman they created. The bailiff called the court to order. All rise. The judge entered. Judge Harrison. I knew him. He was fair, stern, and suffered no fools. He looked at me and nodded slightly. He knew I was a judge in the next county, but today I was just a civilian. Then they walked in. Kevin and Karen, they had aged. Kevin was balding now, his hair thin and gray. He walked with a slight limp. Karen was heavier. Her face was lined with smoker's wrinkles, but they had cleaned up. They were wearing mourning clothes. Black, somber. Karen had a lace handkerchief in her hand. Kevin was holding her elbow, acting the protective husband. It was theater, pure community theater. They sat at the plaintiff's table. They didn't look at me. Not once. They stared straight ahead at the judge, their eyes wide and watery. Their lawyer, Barry Ritz, stood up for opening statements. He was wearing a shiny gray suit and too much cologne. I could smell it from across the aisle. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Barry began. His voice was oily. This is a story of a tragedy. A story of two loving parents who had their baby girl stolen from them in the blink of an eye. I clenched my hands under the table. Stolen. For 29 years, Barry continued, pacing in front of the jury box, Kevin and Karen Miller have searched. They have prayed. They have lit candles. They have suffered the unimaginable pain of the empty chair at the dinner table. I looked at the jury. They were listening. A few of them looked sympathetic. It's a powerful narrative, the grieving parents, the lost child. And then, Barry pointed a finger at me, they found her. A miracle, but instead of a reunion they found this. They found a daughter who had been poisoned against them by her captor, William Vance. He paused for effect. William Vance is dead, so he cannot defend himself, but his estate is here, and that money belongs to the parents who were robbed of their child's life. It is the only justice left for them. He sat down, looking satisfied. Elias stood up. He didn't pace. He didn't wave his arms. He stood behind his desk, solid as a rock. We will keep this simple, Elias said. His voice was low, forcing the jury to lean in. The plaintiffs did not lose their daughter. They discarded her. They did not search for her. They cashed in on her. And this lawsuit is not about love, it is about greed. We will prove it. Short, brutal, the trial began. Kevin took the stand first. He looked pathetic. He hunched his shoulders. He wiped his nose. Mr. Miller, Barry asked gently, tell us about that day in 1994. Kevin sniffed. We were going to Disney World. Ava was so excited. We were at the airport. I just turned my back for a second to check the flight board. Karen went to the ladies' room. When I turned back, she was gone. Did you look for her? Everywhere, Kevin cried. A fake tear rolled down his cheek. I screamed her name until my voice was gone. I ran through every terminal. Security wouldn't help us. They said she probably just wandered off. And after, we never stopped looking, Kevin said. We put up flyers. We hired detectives. We spent every penny we had trying to find our baby. Liar, I thought, you spent every penny on blackjack. And when you found out she was alive last week, I fell to my knees, Kevin sobbed. I thanked God. I just want my daughter back. I don't care about the money. I just want to be a family. I felt bile rising in my throat. It was masterful. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed him. He was playing the role of the broken father perfectly. Then it was Karen's turn. She was even better. She shook. She trembled. She clutched her handkerchief. I wake up every night screaming her name, she whispered into the microphone. My baby, my little sunflower. She used the nickname, Sunflower, because of the dress I was wearing. Did William Vance ever contact you? Barry asked. No, Karen spat. Her eyes hardened for a split second. He stole her. He kept her for himself. He was a monster. I had to look down. I looked at the table. I focused on the grain of the wood. If I looked at her, I would scream. She was defiling William's memory. William, who sat up with me when I had nightmares. William, who paid for my braces. William, who loved me when she didn't. Cross-examination, the judge asked. Elias stood up. Mrs. Miller, Elias said calmly, you say you searched for Ava for 29 years. Yes, Karen said. Every day. Did you hire a private investigator? Yes, many. Can you name one? Karen blinked. It was a long time ago. I don't remember the names. Did you keep records of these investigations? We lost a lot of papers in a move, she stammered. I see, Elias said. No further questions. He let her off the hook. I looked at him, confused. Why didn't he destroy her? Elias sat down and scribbled a note on his legal pad. Wait for the kill. The prosecution rested. They felt good. They felt they had won the jury's hearts. Kevin and Karen were holding hands, looking brave and tragic. Defense, call your first witness, Judge Harrison said. Elias stood up. He didn't call me. The defense calls Megan Miller. The air left the room. Kevin and Karen froze. Their heads snapped toward the back of the courtroom. The color drained from their faces so fast it looked like a magic trick. They looked like ghosts. The double doors opened. Megan walked in. Megan looked terrified. She was wearing a simple gray cardigan and black slacks. She looked like she was dressed for church. Her hands were shaking. I had met her the night before. I had gone into the diner. I had told her everything. I showed her the photos. I showed her the lawsuit. I told her who I was. She had cried for an hour, then she got angry. Now she was walking past our parents. Kevin reached out a hand. Megan, he whispered. She didn't look at him. She walked straight to the witness stand and sat down. State your name for the record, the clerk said. Megan Miller, she said. Her voice was small but clear. Megan, Elias asked gently. Who are the plaintiffs in this case? My parents, she said. Kevin and Karen Miller. And do you know the defendant, Ava Hart? Megan looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. I do now. She's my sister. A murmur went through the courtroom. The jury was leaning forward. This was the twist they hadn't expected. Megan, Elias said. Growing up, did your parents ever mention Ava? No, Megan said. Never? Did you see pictures of her? No. Did they ever talk about a lost child, a missing sister? No, she said firmly. I was raised as an only child. I didn't know I had a sister until yesterday. Kevin stood up. This is a lie, he shouted. Sit down, Mr. Miller. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. Kevin sank back into his chair. He looked sick. Elias continued. Megan, your parents testified that they spent every penny searching for Ava. Can you tell us about your financial situation growing up? Megan took a deep breath. We were poor. But confusingly poor. Explain that. We lived in a trailer, she said. But there were always remnants of money. Fancy clothes that didn't fit anyone, expensive watches that didn't work, and we went to casinos. A lot, casinos. Yes, every weekend. They would leave me in the motel room with a bucket of fried chicken and go to the boat. They loved to gamble. Did they ever talk about where the money came from? Once, Megan said. She looked at her mother. Karen was staring at her with pure hatred. I was 16. We were fighting about money for a school trip. Mom was drunk. She screamed at me. She said, we used to be rich, we had a windfall. And we blew it on bad luck. A windfall, Elias repeated. Yes. Did they ever seem sad, grieving? Megan shook her head. No, they were bitter, they were angry at the world. But they weren't sad, they never lit candles. They never prayed for anyone but themselves. Thank you, Megan. Barry Ritz, the slimy lawyer, tried to cross-examine her. Megan, he sneered. You're just jealous, aren't you? Jealous that your sister has millions and you wait tables. Objection, Elias shouted. Sustained, the judge said. I'm not jealous, Megan said, cutting through the noise. I'm horrified. They threw her away like trash. And they treated me like a burden. I'm here because I don't want them to hurt her again. She stepped down. The room was buzzing. The narrative of the grieving parents was cracking, but it wasn't broken yet. It was just he said, she said. It was time for the hammer. The defense calls Ava Hart, Elias said. I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I walked to the stand. I sat in the chair. I looked at the jury. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I was a judge. This was my office. Ava, Elias said, tell us about November 14, 1994. I told them. I told them about the counting game. I told them about the cold bench. I told them about the numbers. 1, 2, 300. I spoke calmly. I spoke clearly. The courtroom was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. I saw the jury members wiping their eyes. I saw the judge's jaw tighten. Did they come back? Elias asked. No, did you ever hear from them again? Not until 2 days after my father died and left me money. Thank you, Ava. Elias turned to the plaintiffs. We have one final piece of evidence to enter. He walked to his table. He picked up the yellow document. Defense enters Exhibit D, Elias said. A sworn affidavit signed by Kevin Miller and Karen Miller, dated December 20, 1994, filed in the U.S. District Court of Illinois. Barry Ritz stood up. Objection, I haven't seen this. It's public record, Counselor, Judge Harrison said. Overruled. Elias handed a copy to the judge, a copy to Barry, and walked the original to the witness stand. He handed it to me. Ava, can you read the highlighted portion? I held the paper. I looked at Kevin. He was pale. He knew what this was. He remembered. I read aloud, my voice ringing off the walls. I, Kevin Miller, swear under penalty of perjury that my daughter, Ava Miller, is deceased. Her body has not been recovered, but due to the circumstances of her abduction, we accept her death and release Oceanic Airlines from further liability in exchange for the sum of $450,000. The courtroom gasped. It was a collective intake of breath. Thank you, Elias said. He turned to Kevin and Karen. They didn't search for you, Ava, Elias said to the room. They declared you dead. They signed your death warrant for a payout. And today, they sat in this chair and lied to this court, claiming they searched for 29 years. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, the defense moves for an immediate dismissal with prejudice. And we would like to refer this matter to the district attorney for charges of perjury and fraud. Kevin jumped up. We didn't know, we thought she was dead. Sit down, the judge roared. The judge looked at the paper. He looked at Kevin. He looked at Karen. His face was red with fury. Judges hate many things, but they hate being lied to in their own house most of all. Mr. Ritz, Judge Harrison said, his voice dangerously low. Did you know about this document? No, Your Honor, Barry was sweating. He was backing away from his own clients. I had no idea. I withdraw as counsel. You can't withdraw, Karen shrieked. Fix this? It is not fixable, the judge said. You have committed perjury in my courtroom. You have filed a frivolous lawsuit based on fraudulent claims. He turned to the bailiff. Dismiss the case. And officer, take the plaintiffs into custody. I am holding them in contempt pending charges. It happened fast. The chaos was immediate. The bailiffs moved in. Kevin tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. He scrambled over the railing, but a burly officer grabbed him by the back of his cheap suit jacket and slammed him against the wall. Get off me, Kevin screamed. It's my money, she's my daughter. I made her. Karen was screaming too, but she wasn't running. She was sobbing, but these weren't the pretty, fake tears from before. These were ugly, terrified sobs. I didn't do it, it was his idea. Kevin made me sign it. They turned on each other instantly. The rats were abandoning the sinking ship. I sat in the witness box and watched. I didn't move. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was lighter than that. It was relief. The noise was deafening, the gavel banging, the shouting, the click of handcuffs. I watched the officer pull Kevin's hands behind his back. I heard the metal ratchet of the cuffs. Click, click, click. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. They dragged them out. Kevin was still shouting about the money. 5 million, that's my money, I deserve it. He passed by me. For 1 second our eyes met. There was no love in his eyes. There was only greed and hate. He looked at me like I was a broken slot machine that refused to pay out. You ungrateful brat. He spit at me. I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye. I'm not your brat, I said calmly. I'm the judge. And then he was gone. The doors swung shut. The shouting faded down the hallway. The courtroom was silent again. The dust settled. Judge Harrison looked at me. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Miss Hart, he said softly, I am terribly sorry you had to go through this. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. The case is dismissed, he said. The assets remain yours, and I will personally ensure that the district attorney sees the transcript of today's proceedings. Thank you, I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I forced them to hold me. I walked back to the defense table. Elias was packing up his briefcase. He looked at me and nodded, a rare sign of respect. You did good, kid, he said. You too, Elias. I turned around. Megan was still sitting in the back row. She was crying silently. I walked down the aisle. The gallery was emptying out. People were whispering, pointing at me. That's her, that's the girl. I didn't care. I only saw Megan. I stopped in front of her. Are you okay? I asked. She looked up. Her mascara was running. They're going to jail? Yes, I said, for a long time. Good, she whispered. Then she looked panicked. I don't have a ride. I came with them. I held out my hand. Come with me, I said. It was the same thing William had said to me 29 years ago. Come with me. Megan looked at my hand, then she took it. Her grip was tight. We walked out of the courtroom together. 2 sisters, 2 survivors. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sun was trying to break through the clouds. The pavement was wet and shiny. Are you hungry? I asked her. Starving, she said. I know a place, I said. They have really good ice cream. She smiled. It was a small, fragile smile, but it was real. I'd like that, she said. The aftermath was messy, as legal things always are, but it was a distant mess. Kevin and Karen were charged with perjury, fraud, and attempted extortion. Since they had crossed state lines to commit the fraud, the feds got involved. They were looking at 10 to 15 years. They would die in prison. I didn't visit them. I didn't write to them. I closed the book. I kept the house. William's house, but I made some changes. I invited Megan to move in. She hesitated at first. I don't want to be a mooch, she said. I'm used to working. You're not a mooch, I told her. You're family, and you're going to go to college. William left this money for his daughter, and as far as I'm concerned, he would have wanted another one. She moved into the guest room. We spent the first month just talking. We sat on the floor of the living room, drinking wine, sharing stories. She told me about the trailer park. I told her about law school. We pieced together the missing years. We realized that we were two halves of the same whole. I had the resources but no blood family. She had the blood family but no resources. Together, we were complete. I went back to work. But I was a different judge now. I was more patient. I listened harder, especially when children were involved. One afternoon, about 6 months after the trial, I drove to the airport. I parked the car and walked into Terminal 3. It was loud. It smelled like jet fuel and coffee, the same smell. I walked down to the lower level, to the baggage claim. I found the spot, the oversized baggage area. The metal bench was gone. It had been replaced by modern plastic seats. But the conveyor belt was the same. I stood there for a long time. I watched the bags go round and round. I saw a little girl sitting with her mother nearby. She was about 5. She was eating a pretzel. She looked happy. I closed my eyes. I could see myself there. The little girl in the sunflower dress, the ghost. I imagined walking up to her. I imagined kneeling down. It's okay, I would tell her. You don't have to count anymore. You don't have to wait. They aren't coming back, but someone better is coming. You're going to be strong. You're going to be smart. You're going to be a warrior. I opened my eyes. The ghost was gone. I reached into my purse and pulled out a red scarf. It was old. It was the scarf William had bought me that first winter. I had kept it all these years. I wrapped it around my neck. It was soft and warm. I wasn't the baggage anymore. I wasn't the unclaimed item. I walked out of the sliding doors. The automatic doors whooshed open. The air outside was crisp and cool. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Megan. Dinner's ready. I made tacos. Don't be late. I smiled. I walked to my car. I got in. I checked my mirror. The woman in the reflection looked back at me. She looked steady. She looked peaceful. I started the engine and drove home.